All right. Okay, very good. So we're
Part two.
Yeah, part two, back to recording.
Today is September 9th, 2020.
2020, coming to you from Philadelphia and Northwood near New York. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Northwood near.
How do we get this thing? Oh, that goes away?
What?
Going away so
There's
fast.
this,
Shh, shh. It
sign.
says down below that it says leave meeting. I'm afraid.
No, don't leave.
Don't press it.
Continue.
Should I hit continue?
Yeah,
Yes?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Daddad, move a little bit closer to grandmother.
Oh, good.
Oh, he's wearing glasses.
Yep,
Glasses.
because I have to be able to see.
Right.
What's this? Oh, I didn't write down.
I made a couple of
anything.
notes.
Oh, but you didn't tell me.
It's okay.
It's
Don't
fine.
worry. Don't worry.
The more organic, the better. Anyway.
Yeah, we sent the questions just so you can have a little bit more of a full. So anyway,
Oh,
today.
First for you, we wanted to backtrack a little bit. Last time you spoke a lot about each of your parents, but you didn't mention your grandparents.
By name,
Yeah, by name.
and just so we rewatched part one, and when we had asked the questions about name your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, you had named your parents and your siblings, but you didn't state the names of your grandparents and where they were born, if you know where they were born. So now we're just going to backtrack. What were the names of your grandparents and where were they born?
There are two sets each. Want me?
Right, 2 sets each. That's right.
All right. On my mother's side, there was her mother who was who lived with my mother and our family for a while. She used to go from sister to sister or things like that occasionally for periods of time, and lived with us. And she was very good at different things like cooking and whatever.
What was her name? Her name?
Her name was Sarah, or Sarah, I guess.
Lighter.
And the last name was Leiter, Leiter, which means ladder in German.
Okay.
And remember that she and my mother lived in Hungarian, the area called Galicia, okay?
Okay.
And what can I tell you? Oh, she was widowed a long time. I never saw her husband or anything, or my grandfather, on my mother's side. And my mother had, let's see, at least 3 or 4 sisters. And they were Aunt Anna, who with her husband ran this bungalow colony in the Catskills, Mountaindale. And then there was, God, I can't think.
The barber's wife.
Hmm?
The barber who owned it.
Oh, Aunt Annie. I just said that. That was Aunt Annie. Her husband was a barber as well as the guy who ran or fixed things around the bungalow colony. Very interesting guy, very quiet, very interesting. Let's see. Oh, then there was Aunt Rose, who was my grandmother's youngest daughter.
No,
And
Aunt Rose was the daughter of someone.
say again?
Aunt Rose was whose daughter?
Aunt Rose was whose daughter?
Who was her mother? Her mother was your sister, your mother's sister. Aunt Rose was your mother's niece.
Oh, Aunt Rose was my, okay. Let's see. There was Rose, Annie. There was also an Aunt Esther, who also got married, but she had a distinguishing problem of a tremor, so she shook most of the time. But you're a lovely, very kind, gentle, great person. And oh, my only sibling of our immediate family was Jeanette.
No, what about your mother's brother?
Oh, then there was my mother's brother. In addition to the sisters, there was a brother that was Uncle Joe Leiter. who sort of lived a solitary existence and had a big work ethic. He always had to do some work or other. And, but he's a very gentle and kind guy to all of us.
What about your father's side?
Wait, hold on, wait, so your grandfather's name was also Bernard, or no, that was your other side?
On my father's side.
On your father's side, so what was your maternal grandfather's name?
I really don't know,
Okay,
come to think of it right
Okay.
now.
but his last name was Leiter.
Let's see, who am I missing?
Lighter.
Leiter, his name is Leiter.
His last name.
Joe.
And then your
Uncle Joe
maternal,
traveled around alone at different times of his life and wound up in the US, but he was in Germany for a while and elsewhere. But, and he was sort of an itinerant workman, always had to get something to do or he worked in a factory, I remember.
Worked in the Catskills.
Worked in the Catskills. He was known as a salad man. He used to prepare salads for
Oh, very nice.
country club or a hotel. But what else can we say?
What about your
There was one other sibling involved there. That was Aunt Rose's brother, and their last name was Charlotte. His name was Jack Charlotte. At one point, he just picked up and left the family. Went out west, where we never heard from him again. But he was a very nice looking guy, really nice guy, but felt he couldn't take that existence anymore, and he went somewhere else.
wow,
That was Jack Charlotte, and Charlotte is spelled S-H-L-I-T, Charlotte.
oh, okay. I thought you said-
Sounds like Schlitt.
Yeah, it sounds, yeah.
Oh, and then Rose had another brother whose name was William, and he called himself William Stewart. And he was closer to my age later on, and he used to ride around on a horse with a cowboy hat and cowboy attire. And he was my mentor. He was a buddy of mine.
That wasn't Rose's brother. That was Mary and Eva.
Mary.
All right.
They're a cousin. Those are cousins.
Very good.
Well, Bill was a cousin.
Hmm?
Bill was a cousin.
Bill was cousin Bill.
These are children of his Aunt Annie.
Right. Then there was cousin Mary, who was married to a wartime aviator, and that was Mary and Alan, and their last name was Greenstone. We used to visit them in Florida. They lived in Florida after a while, and then Alan got sick and died and left Mary for a while. Mary had a daughter, Adrian, of all names, and actually she showed up in our family group about a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. Cousin Adrian, fairly short, pleasant gal who married somebody and lives up in upstate New York. And we don't get to see her too often, but apparently Emily does.
Emily sees her.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, on my father's side,
Your father's side.
father had 3 sisters.
No, start with his parents. Start with his parents, your grandparents.
Start with what are your father's parents' names?
My father's mother and father. Okay.
Right.
His mother was Sosha, who was like the patriarch of the COVID family, who was matriarch, I should say. Thank you, sweetie. Back to reality for a while. Let's see, Sasha. And she was a well-respected woman, a woman of few words, but when she spoke, you were aware she was there. And she had a couple of daughters and my father and his brother. So I had an uncle, Abraham, Abe, and another daughter was Lena. The distinguishing thing about Lena, unfortunately, she had a hunchback,
Oh,
and
wow.
she was very little. But to look, she was supposed to be the prettiest of them all.
Never
Somehow.
married.
Never married. So for a long time in our growing years, everybody that spoke to Lena or about Lena, she'd say, and I hope she gets married.
Mhm.
Right. Something like
I have a question. What did you, Daddad, what did you call your grandparents?
What did I
What
what?
did you call
What did you call?
Was it Bubby and Zadie?
Oh, Baba. So it was Baba Sasha, and Aunt Waxman was my Aunt Pauline. There was another aunt,
Gussie?
Aunt Gussie. Now, Aunt Gussie was the more modern of the three sisters and the siblings. And in fact, I have, oh no, I don't, that's Gussie, yes. I have her wrapped around on my, I have different pictures of her, very striking.
So your grandfather, no, your father had a sister named Gussie and he married someone named Gussie?
There was someone
Kind of
named,
like grandmother.
Yeah, that's kind of like, yeah, you're double names. Also, was Gussie that common of a name that people,
There are a lot of guys.
apparently it was.
I was named, my middle name Gail is for Daddad's mother, Gussie.
Right.
I'm glad that they went with Gail instead of Gussie. But yeah, Gussie apparently is a family name.
My Uncle Abe and my
Uncle Abe married twice.
first time, a woman who was really not liked by
I
her,
never knew
that
her.
side of the family, never knew her, but she was a little mean, I guess, or something. But she was very good to me and others. But she died and was replaced by Aunt Rose, who was our personal
Who
friend,
we loved.
and we loved, and we go around and
Who lived in they lived in Oceanside.
lived in Ocean. So you mean?
Aunt Rose and Uncle Abe lived in Oceanside, and she loved gardening and
Oh yes,
flowers.
she had a green thumb. So whatever she grew, if we try to grow something, after a while it would wilt and go crazy. She would grow something and it would blossom and bloom and whatever, and had a great outdoors to work with in the property that they lived on, and did great things. But she was very good, and she was also modern. No hardly any accent.
She
at
had
all.
no accent.
Had no accent. Uncle Abe was very soft-spoken, but he was very little spoken. He spoke little, except if he was with his peers or whatever, and then he would, carry a conversation. My dad was not too speakative or talkative, but he, also
I never
was
heard
there.
that word.
Mhm.
But about my sister, Jeanette, who
Right.
is 4 years and 4 months older than me, who died a year or so ago
At 99.
at 99.
Right.
Hey, how old am I going to be?
You're having
Tomorrow.
Having a birthday very soon. Like,
Right, it's notable that tomorrow just so happens to be Daddad's birthday. We won't say the year. I mean, we won't say the age. We'll just say that Daddad
It's
will have a
Daddad's
birthday. Yeah, Daddad's birthday tomorrow.
Aunt Jeanette,
This is something to talk about offline, Squeeze.
Aunt Jeanette went with her first husband for like 7 or 8 years. And he was a dentist who had his practice in the evening. And then after he was
late at
finished,
night
with his patients, he
at
would
10 o'clock.
come to the apartment and visit Aunt Jeanette. And
And one time,
that's the story I remember.
let's say it together. And one time my dad couldn't take it anymore, and he came in, they were sitting in the kitchen, and she had prepared a meal for, what's his name? And they were
George.
sitting back, and you know, they were in their, what is it called, the wooing period or whatever. And he said, I'm so, and words to this effect, I'm sorry, but it's very late. We have to go to bed already. And we're in bed already, you know, you have to leave. He suggested that George, who was her fiance at that time, or going to be, they had a long engagement period. How many
8
years?
years.
8 years.
What?
But then George married her. Then Roz will tell you what happened right after that.
George,
Yeah.
for one thing, we were living out of town at that time, and George wrote us a letter that we shouldn't worry. His
That
intentions were good
It's
with
been
Jeanette,
honorable.
and he loved her, and he did marry her. We never actually attended the wedding, but unfortunately, George had had a problem which we were not aware of. He had something removed from his leg,
had a tumor on
and
his leg,
it was a cancer,
and it spread.
which spread. And so Jeanette became, and they moved
He
to
moved
a
to
small
another-
apartment in the Bronx when they were married. And then when Jeanette became pregnant, which was soon after, and George got sick, he moved back to his mother's
He moved back.
apartment. And Jeanette was left
In
to
our-
care for the
She had a new baby,
baby.
Arthur.
and the baby was
And,
cousin Arthur. Okay,
And
Mhm.
George passed away. And that's when the parents, Jeanette and her mother and father and Arthur, moved to Brooklyn to a place in Flatbush where cousin Beatty, who was the daughter of Pauline and whatever his name was, Sam Waxman, had moved. And they settled in this place in Brooklyn, which was across from the cemetery. It was a new apartment building, and it was, what do you call it? Where they buy their apartment,
oh, they made it a condo.
condo. No, it wasn't a condo. It was something else.
Yeah, what's the other thing? The
Co-op?
next to a condo,
A co-op?
Co-op.
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 It went co-op.
Yeah, so that's where Arthur spent his, moved as an infant. He still lives there.
Right,
Mhm.
okay.
Okay, now let's move on.
Wait, hold
Or
on,
no,
so,
no,
hold on, wait, before we
to do grandmother's side.
oh, right, okay.
So grandmother, start with your grandparents. What were their names?
Much easier for me because my father moved from where he was living in Poland to Germany and then to Mexico and then to the United States. And I never knew, that was one of my questions, never knew who his father was, but he was part of a second family. It was a second, marriage for his mother. So I only knew his mother, who was grandmother, and her name was Pauline. And our son Paul is named for her. We had a beautiful big oval picture, with those oval frames that they used to have. And when we first moved to, and we had it, I don't know what happened to it, but when we first moved to Trist Place, Wood Lane in Woodmere, we had a water problem, a water pipe broke, and many things in our basement were destroyed. And I think that picture was destroyed because I lost it and I felt terrible. I never, that was the only picture I
Okay,
had of
period.
her. And so my father never really talked much about his family, except that,
So your father had been married first to a woman, and do you know if that first marriage?
my grandfather,
I mean, your
Yeah.
grandfather had first been married to an initial wife.
Wait, what was his name?
Yeah, what was his name? Your grandfather.
You
Oh
don't
no,
know?
grandmother said she doesn't know.
Oh,
his
you
name.
don't know.
Okay, but you do know that he had two marriages.
because my father had half brothers and sisters. And in this country, he had a brother in the Bronx named Uncle Philip, who was married to Aunt Rachel. And he had a sister. I don't think these were full. They were halves.
Mhm.
A sister who was another one, Aunt Gussie.
Oh my God.
It was common.
Yes.
So many Gussies.
She was married to a baker. And every time we visited them, and they had 3 daughters, and every time we visited them, we never really saw him because he had to get up early in the morning and go to the bakery. So he was like this figure, he was there, but he was never there. And my father had another sister, and I think that's the sister that brought him over. Her name was Aunt Yetta, and she lived in Brooklyn. Her husband was Philip, and he had this very nice shop where he made clothes for people. They were quite well-to-do, as far as I know, and they had children who were older. So I didn't know. I didn't have dealings with these people. I only knew the relatives of my Aunt Gussie, Marilyn, Ruth, and Stella.
And what was your?
Gussie, because she made this lunch for us. It was chopped up cheese, cucumbers, tomatoes.
Ooh, that's
Always delicious.
very good. And what was your father's mother's name?
Pauline.
Oh, Pauline, right, okay. And then your mother,
And you called her grandmother?
No.
I didn't call her anything. She was in Europe.
Oh, I misheard. I misheard.
No, I didn't know those people. She was a picture. That's why I said, I'm sorry I lost the picture, because I lost her.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And
Then you're.
Others, family boy, they took over. My mother had parents called Esther, and the hell was my grandfather's name?
Mom? Morris? Zeta, we called him.
Yeah, it was Baba and Zeta, but his name was Barnett.
Barnett. Barney.
Barnett. And they lived around the corner from us, and they had 5 children. My mother was the oldest, then her sister Anna, then Uncle Sam, who was your daddy's best friend, and Uncle Mo, who was Maurice's best friend, Aunt Yvette.
Who's everybody's best friend.
Especially mine. And Aunt Yvette was like
Modern.
12 or 13, 14 years older than me. So I remember her as a young person. And then I remember they used to wear organdy dresses with polka dots. And so I visited them all the time. We were terribly close. And then Uncle Mo got married to Aunt Rebecca. They had 2 children, Trudy and Larry.
Trudy.
Cousin
Speak up.
Trudy.
Yeah.
Auntie Anna married Uncle Al. They had Beverly and Rochelle. Uncle Sam married Aunt Lynn, and they had Cousin Adrian and Cousin Lenny. And Auntie Yvette married Uncle Lester in Baltimore, and they had Cousin Ivan, Sharon, and Rhonda.
This is all recorded in the Bible,
These are all my cousins.
We gotta make a tree.
I was the oldest.
What'd you say?
I was the
You're
oldest.
the
Right.
oldest.
Right.
People followed me.
Right.
And then eventually we had a cousins club. It was fun.
Right.
Okay. Done?
I have a separate question. So I recall Daddy at some point telling me on more than one occasion, not recently, but long enough ago that I don't remember specifically, that somebody's father drank pig's blood in order to access coming to the United States, leaving Europe. Does that ring a bell? So maybe he made that
I
up.
made that up.
No,
Okay,
I don't think he made it up. He had said somebody had to drink pig's blood in order to some situation where that moment had arisen.
You may have read that in a novel somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I don't know
don't
what
think-
he was doing telling it to me.
Okay, okay.
Okay, well, I'm glad we cleared that up.
All
Okay,
right.
next.
I just want to fill in a couple of things we said the last I got to say. I wasn't thinking about it. When I was in the Army and chosen to work in the meteorology section, I went to school for that. And it was really like a schoolroom, a very college schoolroom level. And I had a textbook, and we had to learn the different items of atmospheric information and things like humidity and temperature and things like that. And so that got me into meteorology, and I was very much interested and still was. I was sorry I couldn't find that book anymore. But then my next chance of going into schooling was officer training. And I remember that quite distinctively because when we first arrived in this classroom, guy who came in was a fairly brusque individual. He says to everybody gathered in the sitting at the desks and stuff like that, he says, you guys were chosen by a higher command because they felt you had officer possibilities, leadership, and they were going to teach you the meaning of officer and gentleman. And it turned out to be that
That was a movie.
yeah,
That was a movie, An Officer and a Gentleman.
Based on data.
okay, it just blew whatever I had in my mind.
An
but-
officer, something about an officer.
Oh, what was I going to say? So that was interesting, and I guess I didn't get to talk about the interesting part of it, but that was interesting.
Well, that's a good
When I
compliment.
came home after the war, which I think you also mentioned, before I joined the Army back in 1943 or whatever, the end of, I graduated in 1942 from high school. So that would be between 42 and 43. What was I going to say? Oh, after I got back from the war, I was going back. Before going to the war, I started college at Brooklyn College, which was a tough place to get into. You had to have an high average, and luckily I must have squeaked in. But anyway, then after 6 weeks, I went into the Army, and that was put aside. And I went into the Army and went through basic training where they taught you how to fire a gun, how to march in step, and every morning before breakfast, we would have to take a 5-mile hike with a backpack on your back weighing at least 40 pounds. So it was interesting, and it made a man out of me to that extent. However, in officer training school, you had to really learn the culture of the Army. It was a completely different culture from civil life. You had to learn how to take commands and how to handle any questions that your main concern was bringing your troops back home if you were made an officer, as well as following the Army, making sure the Army's regulations were followed. And that applied also to wartime, to combat time. But then when I came back from the Army, my main thing that I had to deal with was, here I was going back to school, but I was 3 years older than most of the kids who had, too young, hadn't been in the Army or anything. So that was kind of strange. But I guess also, since I'd been through Army experience and training and whatever, I was more mature than most of the others were. They were involved in different kinds of younger, growing up.
But there might have been other people who had also been.
Yes, there were other veterans.
Yeah, I'm sure there were other veterans
But
there.
so, that's the way that went.
Dada, do you remember when you said that when you found out you had to go to the war 6 weeks into being at Brooklyn College, do you remember how that felt when you were drafted?
I felt excited. Remember, I was an 18-year-old kid going into the Army, not quite developed in maturity or anything. And but you quickly had to shape up in the Army.
Were you kind of like, were you basically expecting it, or was it like, what was the process of being drafted? Was it
Because they had these draft numbers. If your number was coming up, you knew your
right?
time.
You knew.
And I got the letter of greetings, that
You weren't afraid.
thank you to the Army.
You weren't afraid.
Hmm?
Were you weren't afraid?
Afraid.
No, I guess
Sure, they
Some-
were afraid.
when you say afraid, I didn't know what I was getting into, but I had a sort of a idealized feeling about Army and soldiering and combat and things like that. But you're going with thousands of other people, and
People were very patriotic then,
yes, I
as
was
they
afraid I
were
was
in World
patriotic.
War I.
When I was,
And it wasn't like things are now. Now people are not, and you mentioned, one person getting killed, it's terrible.
and I was aware of what was going on for the Jewish people overseas in Europe, and I felt like I was doing something that I should be doing.
Right.
What am I
Up
doing?
until
When I
then,
got to the Army, one of the first things I did was fulfill my dream of buying a car. And I bought a car, very interesting car, which turned to be our dating
Her
car.
name was Bessie.
We labeled the car Bessie. It was a very nice car. And I drove to school, drove to Brooklyn College every day from the Bronx.
well,
An interesting experience every day.
commute.
It made an enjoying trip because some people would come and get a ride with me to go to college. Some girl who lived about 3 blocks away went to college with me in my car, and that was Joyce Law. Remember Joyce Law?
She was
Okay.
I didn't know she lived near you.
Okay, anyway. Oh, the first thing I did, though, of any interesting, is when I first got my car, I drove with a friend of mine to Canada, all the way from Canada as a new driver in my car.
Very good.
And that was an experience. We saw a lot of interesting things, and it was good. I can't see that. I can't read this.
Okay, any other questions?
The next question.
Okay, so when we had sort of
In officer training, there was one part where they brought in an officer from Texas who was talking to us about different Army regulations and activities and what your responsibilities were. And we went out on a field trip with him, and he was on a stage and addressing us from this stage. And this was a guy from Texas who really was it's like he's ready to start a rodeo or something. He was really an interesting guy. On the stage comes a snake. This is,
oh my God.
it's a dream. Comes a snake, and it looked to me like a rattlesnake.
Well, when it comes to
And
rattlesnakes, it's to hear it, not necessarily see it. Did you hear a?
This guy wasn't phased at all. There was a staff nearby. He came and held the head of the snake down, grabbed the snake up, and held it by its tail. And the bottom of the mouth of the snake was hanging in the air. And what he did was then he snapped it like a whip. And listen to this: the head of the snake fell off.
Oh my God.
And that was a field trip to remember.
This is someone not to be trifled with.
But, he was a really tough guy. He'd been in the Army for a long time.
Oh,
And that was
He knew
it.
how to deal with snakes.
yeah.
Gross.
Whoa.
My turn.
No,
Okay, so
it
so
out.
the where we had left off last time was talking about early part of your career, and initially, at that point, Uncle Paul and Daddy were born, but early parts of your careers in New York. But essentially, the question is now, what was your career work life once you were living in New York for the duration of working once you moved to New York?
First, do you mind if I go back a bit?
That's
No.
fine.
Oh, I thought she's talking to me.
Both,
Yeah,
whoever wants to go
obviously,
first.
yeah.
Okay, you go first.
Well, with my writing education and experience, I looked for a job and was offered a job on a magazine
Right.
called Space Aeronautics after a while. And I was an associate editor on that for several years. And then I used to go to different companies to get information for articles to write for the magazine, which was basically on aviation and space. And I befriended some of the people from Grumman. Actually, I'm jumping ahead too far. I went by steps to other companies and worked as a technical writer and editor and stuff of publications. But then I heard from Grumman, from this fellow who I befriended very much. It was Bill DeGenis, remember him? And so he kept asking me, we need somebody in our business development, which is marketing really, business development department. But the business they were developing was new contract from the government for big space, or not space, aviation contracts, airplane building, new fighter aircraft mainly, Navy aircraft mainly. And so I joined Grumman after working for a couple of small technical companies, smaller, but Grumman was the biggest on Long Island. In fact, they used to say Grumman was what made Long Island green. It was a little slogan, because they hired 30,000 people.
Whoa, I didn't realize Grumman had 30,000 people.
So I worked, and eventually I had in mind, since I was magazine oriented, I took the things that they were producing, and I figured I was going to revitalize them and change them into a magazine that would compete with the whole world of magazines in our field. And that became Grumman Horizons magazine, of which I was the editor and publisher. And what we produced, different magazines that we produced, monthly magazine. We applied for awards, and we won a few nationwide awards for writing and producing a magazine of its caliber.
That's right.
Actually, and mother used to come with me to different meetings where they would present me with a plaque or whatever,
So nice.
Yeah.
and
It's very nice.
to be that award with that goes with that nationwide contest.
What year did you retire?
In November of 1990.
Oh, so
One of the reasons I retired was they would be making buyout things for people to leave, but also the main reason was they were merging for some reason with Northrop Corporation, another big aircraft manufacturer. But it was like the way it worked out, Northrop took over Grumman and merged. So now it's the Northrop Grumman Company
I see.
Corporation.
So I was 11 months old when you retired. Funny, I remember grandmother retired. But
After I retired, I kept working for Grumman as a consultant for 4 years. So I used to walk into like I did when I was employed, I would go back to my office, have my own secretary and equipment and a group that I worked with. And it was very pleasant because here I was, a non-employee, but getting paid for different things, different projects that I would work on.
how often during the week did you go in?
Daily.
Oh, daily. Oh, wow.
When I was a consultant, it was daily, sure.
As a consultant, I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I wasn't only consultant for Grumman, I actually did things for other companies
Got
in scientific fields, and in the oil energy industry, did some, publications for them. And when new magazines in our field started up, somehow got involved and was asked to help out. And a couple of magazines that still exist they came to me and said, how do you do a new magazine and that kind of thing? And I would sort of outline what we were doing. Also, I joined an organization called the Association of Aviation Artists. They were the top artists in their field. And what they did was paint aviation and space type of stuff. And I designed a magazine to be like the bulletin of this organization, but it was really more like a magazine, because that's my specialty, to produce a magazine that really would compete on the open field. And that lasted for a while, but then we got busy, I guess, and something else happened. I don't know why that did not go far. But that's my story.
very good.
So
Very good.
Grandmother, your turn.
I have 30 years or more of experience in the aviation and space field.
Right. Yeah, Dad knows his stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Very nice.
After those 4 years, I did some work from home, consulting and writing and things like that. I thought I wrote a children's story, and I did, but nothing came of that. But that's it.
That's good.
Mhm.
If you want to.
Wait, what'd you say?
Hmm?
What'd you say?
Ask me some questions.
Oh, okay. So I know that you have some patents. So can you speak about that?
The other day, I wonder if I can pull it out. Be there. Maybe. Yes.
We once had a patent for something called a handy line.
No, forget about that. That we never got. It was patent applied for.
Oh.
And it was a little metal lock box that you could put into your medical cabinet, but it was a
That's
separate little
something
box with a special kind of way of getting into it. So you could store dangerous medications in it, and children couldn't open that up
It was not the
because
handy
their
line.
hands weren't big enough to reach the locking mechanism. But
Right.
anyway, that was that. But this, I designed along with others and invented, but I was the one who primarily invented through the idea of an air-to-air model airplane fighting, actually fighting, simulating firing on one another, where the ammunition was electronic pulses that were picked up by the other airplane, and therefore you could score hits on the other airplane. When you did a certain number of hits, it would the engine would cut off, a little puff of smoke, and the other airplane would have to go down. So it was air-to-air fighting, and it's a little complicated.
That's so fun.
Right? And what a patent looks like on the inside, and this thing, it has a lot of boilerplate. This is the outside. Come on, open up. Can you see the little airplanes that are,
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
but it's like
Well, and Dad, I'd say something so it goes back to your voice on Zoom. Say something, anything, just say anything. Just say testing 1, 2, 3, and we'll go back to your question.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
testing 1, 2, 3.
Show it again.
Wait,
Show
don't
it
say
again.
anything special. Okay. Okay.
United States Patent, COVID et al. Means, and we had the people from Grumman. One was a friend of mine who actually worked for me. His name is Richard Koenig, died a year or two ago.
Not a year or two.
Also, the main aviation engineer at Grumman, a fellow by the name of Robert Kress, Kress. And so there were the three of us listed on this patent. It's called a combat simulation means for making it, producing it. And goes on and on to discuss it, but that's a patent. So it runs out after 17 years, and that has already run out. And somebody, some corporation actually capitalized on the concept and produced a thing called laser tag. You ever heard of that? You know, where they
The
Like
game?
a game, laser tag?
energy and you're dead when the thing on gets hit by it. And that's a common, you know, grown-ups, younger usually, will play that game. Anyway, that was laser tag, which was interesting because it was impeaching and encroaching on our patent.
Oh, wow.
But it didn't though.
The position to fight these.
Right, it's a hard thing, yeah. Yeah.
What else can I tell you?
And what about your experience with being an artist and learning to draw and sculpt? Well, I know, I mean with drawing and sculpting.
Oh, we used to do,
Any kind of art, like
Sculpting.
sculpting. I used to sculpt things. I don't know if you've seen anything that I've done.
Yes,
You
I
have.
don't know if I've seen sculpted things.
well, bronze.
What I regret, I sculpted a little rhinoceros, hippopotamus, I'm sorry. A little one, which we used to keep in the den on the shelf.
Yes.
I
where
sprayed
is
it.
it?
I sprayed it gold,
Oh,
and
gold,
somebody
yeah.
bought it.
Oh, that's why I thought it was bronze. I thought it, I didn't realize.
No, we have bronze, but he didn't do that.
What's
That's
that?
the bronze pieces.
Oh, no, bronze there's a bronze.
You made like a lady.
Bronze is from the 18th, 17th century.
Oh, wait, you didn't make that lady?
The lady.
The lady? There's a naked lady that,
Lady he did, but she wasn't bronze. She was colored. She was
She was
sprayed gold.
a sheet metal.
oh, I didn't realize.
That's bronze.
Oh, yeah, I recognize this.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, Dad, I'd say something just to make it go back to your screen.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, there.
1, 2, 3.
What is happening?
Because when one,
On the recording, it only shows the visual of who's talking. So if Daddad's showing something but not talking, it'll show us.
Right.
So the audio has to be coming from you.
the Zoom thing.
To Zoom.
See another bronze? Look at that. This is made by the Tiffany Studio.
Oh,
Says Tiffany on the bottom. It's a little hippopotamus. You see?
yeah.
Okay. At the end of the bronze story.
Grandmother's like, when is it my turn?
What'd you say?
Nothing.
So now, grandmother, we can transition to speaking about your experience, your career in New York.
Is that a question? for me?
Okay, but the first thing I wanted to say, and if I remember now, was that when I was young and we used to have holidays at my grandparents' house, when we'd go for seders, and all the children would congregate, and my grandfather would be running the seder, and we'd
Children.
always kind of
Made a lot of noise.
fiddle around and giggle and laugh, and he would say, "Shut still,"
Means shut up.
meaning stop, be quiet. And we would be hysterical.
Worry about this grandfather, Baba's husband. when there'd be gatherings in her father's house, they would be playing the piano, and occasionally this grandfather would sit down at the piano. It looked like he was playing with his elbows, but he would play the piano, really. And what would he sing?
Oh, well, he sang many Yiddish songs.
One was,
And one that I still love is, I Like She.
I Like She. Go sing it, Rod.
I like she, I like she.
Da-da,
And then he would sing it in,
da-da,
the Jewish song would have a lot of English words. And somebody named Aaron Levidoff sings it, and I can hear it on my iPad.
Oh, very nice.
All right, another thing I was going to say is that when I was young, in the summer, if people had a bit of money or whatever they'd go away to the country, and I would go every summer. We would vacation in the country, and we would go to small hotels, and where my mother brought her clothing, and we'd always have to dress for dinner, and it would be very chic, but not in the fanciest. These were like smaller hotels. And sometimes I would sing, I would entertain, and sometimes I was part of the staff. So that was kind of interesting. No, I'm not reading my poem.
Grandmother wrote,
so that was
the summers of my childhood.
What I really liked at that time was I would stop my existence that I had living where I was living with all my friends, and I would make a new friend. And I would make for 2 weeks or whatever, however I was long, I had this best new friend. I never wanted to go home. I only wanted to remain there because I wanted to keep my memories. And I would go home, and for a few days, I wouldn't even want to associate with my friends because I didn't want it to spoil my memory.
Grandmother, there's a phrase that the phrase is, I live 10 months for 2. And that's from the way kids feel about camp, is that they just can't, they live for the whole 10 months of the year just waiting for the summer to come. So they say, I live 10 months for 2.
But I would live for the summer. When summer was coming, I knew that I would be going away, but I'd never know who I was going to meet. And it was so exciting to meet new people. And
who would be your best friend?
One girl I met, we became really fast friends for 2 weeks. And she invited me, I don't know if I ever told you this story, she invited me to her home in Yonkers. I was about 13, and I took the train, went there, and she lived in this big house, and she had we sat down for dinner, and we were served by the maid, and I had my own bedroom to sleep in, and I was overwhelmed with this lifestyle. And then I came home to my 4-room apartment, no maids, no cleaning lady. And it was so different.
Yeah.
But along came her.
It really struck me, the difference, the way people lived. What is this?
Read that.
No, that's a song, Vern.
So sing it.
No, they heard.
No, they haven't heard it.
Yes, they heard.
It's okay if we've heard it.
It's for the video.
Yeah, it's not for exclusively us.
Couldn't make
And
that.
I used to love being with my cousins, especially my cousin Beverly. She was 4 years younger, and we were great friends. And it remained that way until she actually died. We stayed friends. When she married Joe, he had this car. It was called a Rolls Royce, and they used to visit us in Brooklyn when we first came back.
When she was still alive.
From Baltimore. I had Paul, and that's all, just Paul. Charles wasn't born yet. And then
They would park on the block,
Beverly and Joe used to come and have dinner with us, visit us for dinner.
babysit,
And they would park the car on the street.
and the kids
And
around.
all the kids, all the people on the street would go over and stare at
This
this
car
little
took up
boy.
about half a block on the street.
Yeah, Rolls Royce is flashy for anybody to see. You know,
The original
People couldn't
Joe.
believe they never saw it before. But Joe was very strange in the things that he did and collected. And so that was something that was interesting.
The neoclassical man.
And okay, what were you going to ask me?
So the essence of, you know, what your career was in New York.
My career was nothing in New York because my problem was having kids and having them come out instead of being miscarried. And when my children were little, I took care of them. But I was, I had a speech background, and it was a very good background. So
Master's
I
degree.
always thought of going back to school. And then when my father died and Emily, by that time we had Emily. Actually, Joe was very helpful. He helped me have kids because when I kept miscarrying, he told me to take a certain thing called CVP, whatever it was, I don't even know, a vitamin C. When I first had Paul, I had to have injections every day. Daddad had to give me
Stick her
injections
in the rear.
and make sure that I would not miscarry again. And I had this doctor from Johns Hopkins, because we lived in Baltimore. That was her expertise, people who couldn't have children. And she eventually became a doctor that started in utero, you know, having your
Artificial insemination.
artificially inseminated in utero. She was the doctor that did it. She's very famous. And she took care of me. And because of my injections and the care that I had, I did have Paul. But when my mother passed away and I wanted to have another child, I didn't know what to do. And Joe said, well, don't worry, I'll give you this medication or take this. And it worked, you know. I didn't have the problem. And when I wanted Emily, I took it again.
10 years
And
later, after
I couldn't have
the
a
child.
baby for many years, but when I did become pregnant, I had to sit down, tell my children who were then 9 and 12, you're going to have a baby sister.
You're going to have a little sister.
And she was
I've been there.
Paul's bar mitzvah. And so that was exciting. And Joe was very helpful in that. And we became very close. If I ever had a problem, I called up Joe. And meanwhile, Beverly had this child who, when I had Charles, well, when I had Charles, she had Paul before that. And it turned out that he had a terrible problem. He was an autistic child. And at that time, they didn't really know what to do about children like
They
that.
were only theories.
And they took him to doctors everywhere. And of course, nothing would help him. And that's the way he grew up.
Was there any kind of so it is kind of interesting that there were two Pauls.
Yeah, did you resent that?
Not resented, but what was the vibe like? Was Beverly at
No,
first like,
Connection, not my connection. It just worked out that way.
no, I mean, so was Beverly planning on naming a child Paul, and you happened to also name your child Paul? Like, it is
Was
like,
that a conversation?
yeah, was that ever a conversation on, because it is like a random,
No, because her connection, her genes, and her genetic makeup was different. Her family was different. I don't know who he's named after.
Okay.
And it just happened that his name was Paul. I thought if I had a girl, I'd call her Perrine, because I read this book when I was a little girl.
How about Amanda?
It was called The Adventures of Perrine.
Nice.
It would have to be a P,
Right.
because it was going to be named. I had living grandparents, and I had to name it after my father's mother.
Right.
Her name was Pauline. So I knew that it would be a P.
Right.
But of
That's
course,
Paul.
I had a
For
boy,
Paul,
so his name was Paul. Mhm.
Right. And then Paul Van Dyne was born, it was 5 years later,
Born
4 or 5 years later.
before Charles.
Okay.
He's more close to Charles' age, because when we used to go to Beverly and Joe all the time, Paul and Charles would interact. They would play. And they would play whatever games they would play.
Softball games outside.
No, not softball. But
Chess.
I'm talking, different chess. And Paul looked forward to Charles. He was his friend.
Yes.
Paul COVID was above. He was, not involved in that at all. And Emily would be with Amy, because they were a couple of months apart. So it just worked out that the two younger children of me were with the two older and younger children of Beverly. Allie was in the middle.
Right.
And so when my mom passed away, and I had started subbing, just going in occasionally. And I just was at a loss what to do. And there were people on the street where we lived on Tris Place in Bayswater. And one of them was a secretary in a school. And she said, Roz, why don't you go back to work? What do you have to do? You pass a test, you can go back and all that. And so I decided to do it. And I went back as a speech therapist, and I was teaching in Queens. The problem was I couldn't drive.
A pilot program.
So I learned to drive, and I drove this car, the Austin America.
Austin, America, a little British car.
I had to drive to school every
Not this
day.
big.
There was no transportation between Bayswater, Far Rockaway,
And it was 10 miles away.
Right.
Jamaica, and different places where I had to use a car. And I did it. I got my license. I did it. I became one of those people. And I couldn't believe it. I became a teacher. And it was very good. And Emily ended up going to yeshiva, because at that time the schools had changed. When Paul went, the school was beautiful. When Charles went, the school was changing.
A little rough.
When Emily went, that was out of the question.
It was
I
dangerous
couldn't-
because
I could
busing
not.
was added on, and it brought in people from all over the city to what was almost a country day school, and turned
Charles
into.
had a friend in his grade, a black friend who really liked him, and he liked the friend. So
And we
I
used to invite
invited
him
the
to the
friend
house.
for lunch. And after that, something happened with the friendship. The friend became very angry at Charles and used to fight with him, and he abused him.
We theorized
And
he was envious of him.
well, that was the
Us.
reason, because I don't know where this boy was living or came from. And
Pretty rough.
he became, Charles didn't know what to do. Charles wasn't a fighter. So I taught him, I gave him
Karate lessons.
karate lessons, and I knew that I would never be able to invite this child.
How did you know karate? You gave Daddy karate, or you sent him to some other place that gave him lessons?
Took him to a place where,
Oh, okay.
where I tried to.
He became a green belt.
Tried to help him, because it was so surprising to us. This never happened. But then it did happen to me again when I was a teacher,
Oh,
because there was this child who I loved all my children. And this child had a mother, he was Jewish, and she was separated or divorced from her husband. And she had parents who took care of her child on weekends and used to come and tell me all of her troubles. And one day I said to Daddy, you really have to take this kid out. I love him so much.
Take him out
So
to the
we took
supermarket.
his mother and the child to pizza, to the restaurant. And then we went up to their apartment and she showed
Show
me
pictures.
pictures of the family, and it was so lovely. And then all of a sudden,
When,
she
few days
became
later-
very angry and sent notes to the teacher that I came into her apartment and stole pictures that she showed me, and that I was doing bad things
Oh, no.
to this child who I loved. And when someone had, another principal or supervisor had once spoken to us soon after that, they said, never get too close with the children that you work with because they are very different. They come from very different environments, and some of them are just not able to deal with and become jealous or angry
Just teach them to
of
communicate.
the life that you lead according to the life they lead. And that was the God's honest truth. I learned my lesson. I loved my children, but I never.
Grandmother's
became-
leaving out the point that this was a pilot program for the whole city to be watching and
Well,
and copying.
the school that I was in, when I worked in Queens, when I first started working, I was called a speech teacher, and I used to teach the children how to pronounce their words and how to, if they had lisps or other speech problems, that was what I was trained in. But then there was some sort of difficulty with money, and people who were working the least time had to be transferred. And I was transferred to Brooklyn, to a not very good area. And I didn't like it there. But then I had the opportunity because
Good friend.
my speech supervisor, who was in Queens, knew me and liked me and said, they're starting a new program
Pilot program.
in Mill Basin, and they're going to be working with children who were just admitted to going to city schools. They were called autistic. And Roz, would you like to
And
go to this
emotionally
place?
disturbed.
And they were in Mill Basin. Mill Basin was a much better area than the place where they had sent me before. And I said, okay. So I went there first 3 days for the first term. And then they switched me over to every day. And I had this new group of children who I had never encountered in my life. They didn't have speech problems
They were
as far
basket
as
cases.
their articulation. They had no language. They couldn't understand. They didn't know how to express themselves. So I was new in the program, and I started to go to different conferences to learn about these children.
The technique.
And then there was somebody else, Kathy Silverman, who had some knowledge about them, but she wasn't a speech teacher. I was the only speech teacher they brought in. And I was the one who had all this responsibility. But it was the most amazing thing. I had never seen children like this. And I fell in love with them, really. I learned to love them. And we were upstairs in a regular school. We were the first autistic program in the city, in
We had
Brooklyn.
an upstairs floor.
And downstairs was a regular school. And the principal was not involved with us. We had a special principal, a special teacher. But he used to come upstairs. He didn't know anything about us, and he was very
What are
curious.
you doing here?
So he used to walk into my office, and while I was teaching, and he would stand at the window and look out. Listen,
As though we were just walking by.
I was going to die. And then he would walk away. And when the speech supervisor came to observe me, because we had supervisors, she would sit there dumbfounded and say, Roz,
You're doing amazing
how
work.
do you deal with these children? And you know, it was in a learning experience because it had never been our responsibility before. And so I had, then Kathy joined us, and the two of us, and then we had another person join us, and there were three of us. And we worked with the autistic children and with another group of more emotionally disturbed children who also had language problems, and we called them teacher moms.
Mm.
And it was just a new program. And the three of us became extremely close, the three speech teachers. Everybody looked up to us because we were separate, but we were together. We took care of their children, but we didn't walk into their rooms. We
Okay.
pulled the children out. And at the end of that summer, the first summer, there were these experts in Florida, right near Disney World and Disneyland or whatever. And they had a conference, and we all flew down, all three of us, and we spent about a week there. And we came back more excited than ever. I mean, it was exciting. Our program was so exciting, and I never lost that excitement with these children. And the program
Period.
changed through the years. You know, they became more involved, and they stood over us, but they could never touch us. We were always wonderful. And then we learned other ways of dealing with these children, and we walked into the classroom and we worked with a group. I mean, we had different techniques, and then we used the
Took them out of the
computer,
classroom.
and we used what we called communication boards. And the first time we didn't know how to deal with them, so if they said something, we'd give them a pretzel. You know, it was a reward system. But my first group of children were so beautiful and so lovely, I'll never forget them. And when it was time for the mothers to come and have conferences, I mean, these parents
thrilled.
didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
And one mother came over to me and she said, I only want my child to sign a check. I'll feel happy if he signs a check. They had these crazy ideas about their children. And I just loved my program, and I never left.
Yeah, it's an amazing program.
So then when did you retire?
I retired in 95 because in 93, you know, I didn't want to retire, but I was older than the other teachers when I started working. And Paul got married, and we were going to a conference, and unfortunately, we were involved in an auto accident.
She and the teachers, she means.
The three teachers. By that time, there was someone else, not the original. Kathy and I were still there. And we had to be hospitalized. We had to go to the hospital, and it was a very bad experience. And Rita, my friend Rita, was driving, and Kathy blamed her for the accident.
As an
And
insurance
we
thing.
went to, there were a jury trial. Rita had to go to
Okay,
a
get to the
trial. And so Kathy and Rita broke at that point. Their
Never
friendship
spoke
broke.
anymore.
And we were out of school for a long time because we were injured. My back was injured. This one's nose was broken. I mean, we had all different, so it kind of broke. It broke up what was
It
going
was a
on.
head-on collision.
And at that time, I felt that I couldn't just go back to school, so I went on sabbatical, which I never wanted to do, and I never went on sabbatical after teaching for
Like 1 year.
19, 20 years. And you could always go on sabbatical, like after a 13-year stint or 14. But I said, no, I'm never going to leave these kids. I went on the sabbatical. I became involved in other things. I took a dramatics class. I took another kind of class. And then when I came back, I realized that maybe it was time for me to leave. And that's when I left, because Daddy had already retired in 1990. So I left in 1995. We were given an incentive to leave.
Mhm.
And, so I got 25 years, and I felt that was fine.
Was that the car accident you mentioned, was that at that, like you stopped driving forever after that? Is that what happened?
No, I stopped driving forever, or mostly forever, when I retired, and I was involved with the National Council for Jewish Women, and I offered, or I said that I wanted to go to a school and help children, things that I could do. And the first time that I was going to do this, and I was in a hurry, I used to drive everywhere. I was in a hurry. I said, "Oh, Bern, I have to go to the school. Take me, because I want to get there on time." And we had an accident on the way to the school, and I broke my tibial plateau,
In the knee.
and I was in a cast. And that sort of did it.
Right. I have one memory of you driving me somewhere when we went to get pizza in Cedarhurst, but other than that,
Breezy, when she was in dancing school, I would pick her up. We would take her. I drove, or Bern
you drove Breezy
Oh,
to
I don't know. I mean, I have memory of that, but from my recollection, Dad had a
No, you must be remembering something else. Breezy,
I used to drive. I used to drive.
I know you used to drive, but Breezy was born in 2001. In 2001,
Yeah.
you drive.
Well, I know. Then Bern was driving.
I
We
was
used to pick up Breezy, but I did drive a little bit, because if I had to go to the doctor or something, I would drive him home. But then after that, something else happened, and I just
And I was on my own driving.
Right.
became the driver.
I remember one time I was in the car with both of you, and we were driving to cousin Joe's house because you had to drop something off. I remember his house.
Oh yeah, that big house.
Yeah,
Oh, yes,
you had to like run and drop something off.
all the time.
Every weekend.
Then we had a falling out. I think Beverly was also, she never worked. I mean, after she married Joe, and
Yeah, falling out.
something about my job, maybe whatever it was, but we were the only ones that were there. When Paul was not well, we were always there. Nobody else was there. It was
Right.
Daddy and me.
Right.
And there was something about Uncle Sam, and we had a falling out, and
Uncle
they
Sam?
said mean things to me. Yeah, Uncle Sam was with us, and I stopped talking to them, but it was several years, but it bothered me, because I can't be angry at people forever. I'm just not that kind of person.
Except me.
Well, I'm angry at you for a few days, but I mean, I'm not an angry forever person.
Right.
Mhm.
We did get back together.
Right. Okay, well, we have other questions. These are way more general, and Breezy will start with
Yeah.
your favorite place.
Yeah. Okay, so first question. How many places have you lived, and which was your favorite?
Well, actually, no, out of the many places, not how many, you don't have to
Actually,
count.
okay, I don't,
Out of the many places you have lived,
Which one
where
was
is
your
your favorite,
favorite?
including the Bristol?
including
Well,
the
a
Bristol.
couple of favorites. One favorite was when we lived in South Carolina in a beautiful, adorable little house
A big
in
property
Hartsville, South
in the
Carolina.
better part of town.
And it was very sweet. And we were just married, and it was a small town run by a family named Coker. And there was a
Coker
place there
College.
called Coker College. And I had never been, after Iowa, I had never lived any place else. Well, we lived in Baltimore, but that was not my favorite. And I would say that little house in Hartsville, South Carolina. And then I loved living on Trist Place, but I really loved living in Wood Lane.
Woodsburg.
in Woodsburg.
Right.
First, I thought I was afraid because it was so different from what we were used to. And we really didn't have friends in Woodsburg because Emily was already in high school. And we had our own friends, our usual friends, our Heisey friends. Oh, we didn't tell you about Heisey, but we had a whole life with a group of people and we collected. And we always went to antique shows. That was kind of what we did for years and years.
In what year did you move to Woodsburg?
1979.
Okay. And Dad, do you agree with grandmother's assessment, or do you have different favorite places?
Do you agree about that, or did you have other places that you lived better, that you liked better?
No, I think my favorite was Wood Lane in Woodsburg.
Okay. Next.
But in South Carolina was very good and exciting place to live.
Next question is, what has been your favorite place that you've traveled to?
You first?
The place that I loved, well, I loved the years and the places because my brother Maurice and his wife Lynn used to travel everywhere.
With us.
They used to travel their whole lives.
But one
They
thing,
went to every country, every part of the
Right.
world. And my brother would always tell me about these fantastic places they went to. And we only went to California, and once we went to England, and that was an
to
interesting
New
trip.
Jersey.
But I'm talking about out
But
of
the
the country.
Catskill,
Out of the country. And Maurice used to say to me, "Oh, Roz, you never go any place. What are you doing this summer?" I said, "Well, we're going antiquing, we're doing this or that." "Oh, you never go any place." And he said this to me one time enough. And I had already retired. I had just retired.
so
And I said, "Oh, well, where are you going next year, Maurice?" He said, "We're going to China." I said, "Okay, we'll
we'll
go."
go.
Daddy and I picked you up from the airport when he came back from China. I remember that.
So, that was in 1997 or no, 1999.
Very good. So
So
China was the number one.
became, to me, the most fantastic. We went to China and Japan, not just China.
Stopped in Japan first.
And it was the most lovely. But then it was so nice. I thought that would be good to go again because we went with my brother. And when we went with my brother, he took care of all the arrangements. All we did was
Show up.
buy the tickets, get there.
He would make arrangements for
And
the
do this, do that. When we went to the restaurant, he'd figure out the bill. Maurice was amazing as far as that was concerned. And we didn't have to do anything. We just enjoyed every
carry on
piece of
luggage.
it.
That's
When
it.
we went on the plane, at the beginning, we weren't in first class, but he was. So we'd always go to the first class lounge and wait there. I mean, it was
At the
just
airport,
so
waiting.
perfect. Everything we did was perfect. And so the next year I thought we would do it again, but his friends Jerry and Loretta, who was Maurice's best childhood friend, were going to go with him. Unfortunately, Jerry found out that he had colon cancer and had to cancel the trip. And so we were the stand-ins, of course. I mean, we didn't want it, but that's the way it happened. And so that summer we went to Europe and we went to Italy and we went to France and we went to
That was
England.
great.
And it was beautiful. And
Right.
from that time on, except for the time when Daddad needed an operation and they went to Russia without us, and for the time when we couldn't go to Africa, we were with them every summer for about
They went
10
on
years.
safari.
Very good.
And for 10 years, we had the
Lots of
most
trips.
fantastic experiences, which we wouldn't have had if not for Maurice.
Right. And Dad, do you have any comment on favorite place that you visited particularly?
Visit? Yeah, and in addition to China, we also went to Croatia and down to a
And we
place,
also went to Vietnam
Right.
and Cambodia,
and the other one,
Vietnam, Cambodia, later.
and Thailand.
Thailand, loved Thailand.
It was beautiful. It was
We
so
were at a
different.
hotel which was in a tremendous area with different separate buildings of the hotel, beautiful buildings. Each one was a complete house and with a view of everything around it. And we had a complete house with servants, and you look out the window and there's a water buffalo and somebody driving it, or there are people planting and harvesting rice on the grounds
We had
of
to
the
get
hotel.
injections and make sure, have, take medications before we went, but everything
There was
always
nothing,
worked
we've
out
never
well.
seen anything like that. So,
Oh, and my most interesting time was when I was in, where the hell were we? In Morocco, and we had to they went up a mountain
The
with,
Atlas Mountain.
with a goat, with a
on a mule.
mule.
Grandmother on a mule. I'm on another mule.
I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Oh, when we went to
You heard
Thailand,
that
we
story.
went to an elephant camp, and they would take you on a ride through the jungle or whatever was there. And grandmother refused to get on an elephant. I got on, and we went on a
No,
delightful,
that was in,
interesting elephant walk.
But
grandmother
Very nice.
I went on a mule and I was terrified.
up the mountain.
We had to go, and I said, no, I'm not going.
Yeah.
So we were all
believe
going.
Oh, wow.
And so we had people in the front and people in the back. And I did it. Amazing things which I never would have done.
I know, you traveled all over the world.
Yeah.
We also climbed a volcano called Mount Etna in Italy,
Well,
and
I didn't go that far up.
we reached the
Too bad.
you can only handle so much.
lower part, and we went up to the,
I stayed one place lower.
yep,
But
Very
Very
good.
nice. Okay.
go ahead.
Okay.
Next one.
Next question. Who has been your favorite U.S. president and your least favorite U.S. president, and why?
My favorite president at the time was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because in those years he was like a king. He was like we worshiped him. And later on, I wouldn't have worshiped him because he didn't love the Jews that much.
No, all right.
But I didn't know it. And when he died, I was in college, and I remember going there, and we were sitting on the lawn, and there was like some sort of something for him. I don't know. And I was crying. It was like the most terrible thing had happened. I loved President Truman. But then I guess I loved Ronald Reagan, and I became a Republican because my brother was a Republican and my son Charles was a Republican, and I really decided that I was happier with Republicans. I didn't like the one, who was it?
Lincoln?
No, the one with Lincoln
Carter?
wasn't President Carter. He was not a memorable man.
No.
Kennedy, of course, was
Was a good,
I liked Kennedy.
And Daddad, who was your favorite and least favorite president?
mirrored the same thing.
Mirror the same thing?
And a current president that I would favor, to say it mildly, is Donald J. Trump.
As a favorite or a least favorite?
No, I like Trump. I don't like, sometimes he does annoying things.
Because
But
his style is different.
I liked him because when I saw him against Hillary, who I wasn't thrilled with, I felt that this man had something. He
Something
had
to
a
him.
spark. He
Two
knew
things.
how to win.
Really,
I just felt that way about him, and I was
non-political.
right. He did win.
Now he's up for re-election in longer than a month.
Yeah.
See what happens. Okay, and these are more like fun, whatever kind of
Yeah.
favorite food, favorite holiday, and favorite traditions.
I like Thanksgiving very much. I also enjoy Hanukkah very much. And I'm interested in cantorials, so I'm very interested in the holidays, like the very solemn ones, like Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and Hanukkah, that kind of thing.
Nice. Grandmother?
Favorite food?
Favorite,
Yeah.
however you want to answer, favorite food, favorite holiday, favorite traditions.
Well, I always used to love Thanksgiving and Passover, but Thanksgiving now I don't love as much because that's when my mom passed away on November 26th. And so it
Puts a
makes me
damper on
think
it.
of her at that time. I mean, you know, it's not the most happy time of my life. But I loved Passover. I loved being with my family, all the children, with my grandparents. It was the most perfect time for me.
Yeah, I
And,
would agree. Passover is great.
Then, favorite,
Food?
Food.
Yeah.
Yeah, food.
Food. Favorite food.
I don't know. I like a lot of food.
If you could eat anything right now, what would it be? Oh, would it be the Sherwood Diner?
Wait, grandmother, don't worry.
I love French fries at the Sherwood Diner. Don't do anymore. No. I always liked butter pecan ice cream.
Very nice. Dad, do you have any favorite food that you want to mention or no?
I liked lamb chops when I was younger.
Everybody likes lamb chop. But I like lamb shank on the bone. But I like mac and cheese,
Split pea soup.
steak,
Very
Oh,
good.
yeah.
both like split pea soup.
Very good.
I like the real onion soup, not what they serve here.
Not me.
Now, what else do we like?
And what was the other one? One other thing?
Well, this favorite traditions, but that also is wrapped up in favorite holiday and
Yeah.
you know. Okay.
My favorite holiday is also Passover, just putting it out there.
Squeeze, this isn't about you, but thank you for sharing. Okay, so going on to the next question is, what are you most proud of?
Proud of?
Yeah.
What are you most proud of?
Well, I'm proud that I had children, that I had a family. And I always worry about them. But I'm proud.
Worry?
I'm proud of them. And yeah, I worry. How are they going to develop?
To survive, yes.
I always worry. I worry about my grandchildren.
We're doing okay.
I worry about my grandchildren.
Oh, I like Chinese food.
Me too.
I like shrimp and wild rice.
Wait, but what are you most proud of, Daddad? Aside from the shrimp and the one,
Yeah.
what are you most proud of, Daddad?
Most proud of that I met your grandmother, and we had some really great children and some even super grandchildren. Oh, you too.
I'm proud of certain things that I can do. I feel sorry that I didn't pursue things further, but I've always felt that I had talent in certain
In the
areas,
showbiz.
and I would have liked to.
What are the certain areas?
Acting, dramatic singing, and I'm proud of the work I did when I was in school. I used to write music for the children. They would sing my songs, not the music,
Write
the
the
words.
lyrics.
I would write words,
Lyric.
and I have a whole stack full. I'm
Right.
proud of what I did.
Right, you're a highly achieved
And
poet
as a
and
book-
lyricist.
I started doing that mainly when I retired.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's grandmother's book that Daddad made of select.
Yeah.
Oh wait, hold on, Daddad, say something.
Hmm?
Just make a noise so that the camera switches to you.
You have to speak.
Oh, this is a book of poetry that I made, a collection of grandmother's poetry. And I try to get her to read something from it, but she doesn't want to do it. The
It's
whole story about her summer activities is in a poem in here.
It's okay. Hey, we have that book. We have a copy of that book as well.
Yeah.
Well, this is one copy. I made her think about a dozen or more copies.
Mhm.
Right.
Which-
Okay, so grandmother had mentioned briefly about challenging points and, but the next question is, what have been the most challenging moments in your life, or the most challenging, however you want to answer?
Dealing with illness, dealing with
Paul's
a
illness.
child who is not well for a very long time, and not knowing in the morning how your day would be until you checked his urine sample.
Mhm.
And
And should
figuring out your life.
it show a positive thing or whatever, we'd have to rush to the hospital in Manhattan to see the specialist on that kidney problem, and bring his problem back into control.
dealing with, of course, family death. A mother who I thought would be there for me when all my friends had
Had their
their
mothers.
kids, and they had their mothers helping them and with all the little grandchildren, and I didn't have that experience.
Right.
And, having to deal with somebody's sudden death, my dad, and think death is a terrible thing to deal with, and I don't recommend it.
I'm very
You
proud-
recommend living. All right. Very.
I'm very proud of my writing career and my accomplishments in there. I was considered outstanding in my field. In fact, one of my own staff used to say I was the world's best journalist. That was Burnham Lewis.
Very nice.
Nice to be able to think, to think that you have something special that you can offer, and Daddy feels that way.
I can write. I can produce good prose.
And
Absolutely.
we may not have achieved world fame, but we do know that it's nice to have certain qualities that you can develop that are good.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, the next question is, what are your tips for a long-lasting marriage? And you're going on 71 years next, right? It's 71 years in February?
Well, speaking for myself, I know I can be a pain in the neck to grandmother, and she tolerates it most of the time. But occasionally she lets me have it.
No, it isn't that. It isn't that at all.
I'm very,
Your tips for a long-lasting marriage is to live long. That's your long-lasting.
well, how do you get to live long? You're lucky if you don't get any illnesses.
If you're alive and you're married, and that's the main tip.
I think we've already proved,
Don't die.
but
Well, let's just say that aside from just, beating your record every day of consecutive days alive, aside from that, what are the tips for having, a marriage that is happy, well bonded?
I don't know, because no marriage is perfect, and
there are
every
always
marriage
problems.
has problems, and
Right.
you just. I was born to believe that when you got married, you stayed married. Who knows? If I was born in 1975 or something, and Daddy and I had a fight, who knows if we'd be
Uh-oh.
together?
Oh,
We
we came close.
I would never think of ending a marriage, because, if there were times when I didn't like something or was unhappy, it doesn't last long with me. I think being able to.
While it's there, though, it's pretty
being
vegan.
able to not carry anger with you too much.
Right. No, that's good. Okay, and this is the last question,
Oh,
is what do you want your legacy to be?
I didn't hear that.
What I want my legacy to be?
That's right.
I don't want my family to forget me. That's so scary.
Right.
I mean, I could read you my latest poem, but that'll be
Well,
too.
you haven't, I haven't typed it yet.
No, I'm talking about my mood poem. But, I just don't want, I never forgot my mom or my dad. And I think, people tend to forget, and once you're gone, you're gone. And I know that's true. But I want to feel that someone remembers me.
Absolutely, someone. We're all gonna remember you. Absolutely, and legacy is far beyond. It's not only the memory, but also the values that you've instilled. Like Breezy and I were talking about it, of how the way that Breezy and I are able to convey and articulate and stand in front of a room are, it's not, I don't think it's exclusively just, oh, that's a cool, I think that, at least from my perspective, I think that my ability
It's
to
genetic.
it's genetic, but I also think you and Daddad insisted on teaching me that if I ever speak in front of a group of people, no matter how small or large, I have to be heard and understood, and that I have to be,
Have to know how to present.
yeah, I have to know how to present.
Now, when you were little, remember when you would do things and I would help you?
Of course.
Help you say them and do things like that. But I don't think my grandchildren really were that interested.
We're your grandchildren.
Yeah, actually, I'm interested.
No, absolutely.
No, it's not maybe my grandchildren, my children weren't interested.
Oh, well, they're not here to necessarily give one answer one way or the other.
Just a mother.
But definitely, I know that for me, every activity, whether it was school from any young age, grade school, all the way up until college, any presentation in school, absolutely, I consider you and Daddad to be a thought. Also, when I was in Model Congress, I wasn't just, Model Congress, like a debate club. For me, it was a speaking club. Yeah, the speaking club. And same thing now on Zoom. I've received high accolades for my ability to keep people's attention and be engaging on Zoom for work.
Right.
And every time I've ever given any kind of work presentation or had to give a speech, for work, I always get people coming over to me going, wow, you really do a great job. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, well, grandmother and dad, it's just the way it is. What can I say? So, no, yeah, I think your legacy in some way will always be embodied in me and Breezy, and certainly our kids, they're going to know how to speak and how to present themselves.
Well, we talk about legacy. Legacy is in how all of our grandchildren develop in life and make successes of themselves and are happy at what they do, and really will feel they're producing something of value in this world.
Yeah, I want my family to be healthy, happy, and successful.
And everybody should get married, because we
Everybody should get married.
hurry it up, please.
Right.
I
have to be someone that is good. You know how it is.
I always admire the way Breezy has come up with stuff in writing that truly amazing. Always surprised me, but now I'm not so surprised. Now I expect it of her.
Right.
Well, her father writes well too.
Yes,
Right.
Dad writes well, Daddy writes, everybody writes.
Yeah, it's in our blood. Breezy is a good writer because Daddad is a good writer, because Daddy's a good writer, Mommy's a good writer.
But you inherited somehow.
Do you feel what have you learned from your mother's family?
Lots of things too. It's just a different video, of course. But no, just
a different video with Grandma Cope.
We were talking about that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure out a way, because she doesn't use Zoom. She's not as advanced and high tech as you and Dad.
Yeah.
But no, obviously there's different things, different values, different ways of you know, orienting yourself in the world that mommy has taught us and instilled in us. Definitely a different, you know, always just, you know, I think mommy is very much somebody that has always kind of placed this value of, you know, the importance of children and kids and family, because she spent her whole career working with making families. So it's a different.
Whatever your parents are or did, they worked wonders with their children. I feel they produced two of the best,
Oh, yeah.
greatest children, really.
I think you're the best
We
grandparent.
did it.
You know, sometimes the nicest people have kids who are problems,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I feel that in your case,
Greasy has never been a problem.
oh,
And there, look at
And
that.
there's also a
wonderful.
very nice dog. Yep.
Oh,
Hey,
I
kiss.
forgot about him.
Kiss. Kiss.
But so this unofficially is the video, like the interview kind of thing, unless you have any other last remarks,
Yeah.
you know, we could just, you know, that's it. Do
That
you have
was-
any other?
No,
Thank
we-
you.
We enjoyed it, I think. And
Thank you, girls.
thank you very much for letting us.
Very good.
I'm sorry, I'm a little incoherent because I think at 96, I'm beginning to lose it. I'm just beginning.
Well, we're gonna,
I think you're doing pretty well.
what'd you say? What?
He hasn't lost it yet.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
no, not at all, not at
No
all.
worries, when you come home,
Mhm.
maybe you and Daddy can do a visit. an
Yeah.
hour visit,
We
Yeah,
have,
we'll definitely. We'll do it.
Before it gets too cold out.
Oh my God, yeah, eventually we'll have to do the visits in jackets and boots.
I'm going to turn off the recording and I'm going to tell
Okay.
Uncle Paul that we're done. Hold on, okay.
Bye.
Wait, don't say
I'm
bye.
I'm saying bye to the video.
Oh, bye to the video, bye to the video,
Allah,
but we're not hanging up, okay.
private language, Allah.
Oh, Allah, hold on. Let me